Hi folks, I'm Peter Gibson. Welcome to Darlington's Stream Space, a fantastic local business based here in Business Central, right in the heart of Darlington, hosting podcast filming capabilities. And I'm delighted this afternoon to be joined by Ben Houchen, our Tees Valley Mayor, who was recently re-elected for the third time. And the reason that I want to do this at this particular junction in the general election is because we can't fit every single thing in about all of the great stuff that is going on in our region and here in Darlington in just a few short clips on Facebook. So the idea is that I've got Ben, undivided attention, him to talk to me to talk to him over the next half an hour or so to discuss where we've come from as a region, where we've got to, and where we're going. So Ben, thank you so much for finding the time to join me here in Darlington. You are always incredibly welcome here in Darlington. So thank you for joining us.
No, pleasure. This is all very, very fancy, Peter. Don't see other candidates doing anything like this, so you're ahead of the curve again.
Well, we like to try and step out of our comfort zone and do something a little bit different.
Absolutely.
So you and I have known each other for quite a few years.
Yeah, we have now, yeah.
And
do you remember when we first met?
I think you were still a councillor in Yarm, and it was before.
I would have been, yeah.
It was before you became the candidate for mayor.
Oh, long before. The first time we met, we will have been out. We'll have been helping out in local council elections. Yeah. So back in 2011, I would have thought 2012, something like that. Yeah. God, it feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it, Peter?
I'm a lot older than you, Ben. So the history...
When I was just a boy.
So you've been re-elected now for the third time, and where you've taken our region to, where you've taken the Tees Valley to. I remember the day that you were elected. I remember talking to somebody quite senior in the party, and your result flashed up on the screen, and a whole series of expletives came out at the other end of the phone in disbelief that you'd actually...
Happy disbelief,
a delighted disbelief. But to see where we've come from, all those plans that you had, which I think many people thought, and I'll be honest, me as well, thought they were a bit of a pipe dream.
Yeah, to be fair, when I stood for election, never mind getting elected, the promise around the airport and what we were going to do to save it. Whether it was a journalist or a person in the street, people would look at me as if I had two heads, right? People just didn't think it was achievable. And a lot of that goes down to the fact that over the last 20, 30 years, I think people have been beaten into a form of submission where they just felt like, well, the only thing on offer locally was decline, negativity, and lack of opportunity. So I made a conscious effort to do the opposite, which is, well, actually, we should expect more. We can expect more. We should have more opportunity. We should have more optimism for our future. And I think that caught a lot of people off guard. And there was a lot of cynicism because people were used to that extensive and prolonged decline. And people forget, right? I was elected in 2017 and we did lots of really interesting and I thought quite good things over the first kind of 18 months, 2 years when I was first elected. And you probably won't remember this, Peter, but I remember standing in front of journalists or anybody that I was talking to, what we'd just done, and they'd say, "That's all great, Ben, but have you bought the airport yet?" Like the first 2 years were just marred in that. And the thing that changed everything was delivering on the promise that we'd made. So when we actually ended up saving the airport, all of a sudden people went from, bloody hell, he's actually gone and done it, to, well, he's delivered. So what else is he going to do? And it gives you that kind of credibility and that goodwill with the public, which sadly, as you and I know, is not that common outside of Teesside, Darlington and Hartlepool when it comes to delivery of a politician's actually done what they've said they're going to do. Yeah. And that's helped us build a much bigger, more optimistic programme for our region, and Darlington is no better example than that.
Both as public figures, politicians, we're instantly disliked.
Generally.
We're not believed, and we don't fulfil our promises, and you've fulfilled your promises. I believe that I've fulfilled my promises, and that restores that trust and that credibility. And I think that ambition that we've both shared for our region, you for the whole of the Tees Valley and me here in Darlington, is that kind of energy that drives us both on, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think you do yourself a slight disservice, Peter, in that I couldn't have achieved any of the things that I've done if it wasn't for your support and the other Conservative MPs we've had in the region. It's a team effort. It's one of those things, right? You probably see it in your constituency in Darlington, you're often the one on the front of your newsletters or in the local paper, but it takes a real dedicated team to be delivering on all of the work that we're all doing. And that team had to come together. If I'd just been sat there by myself with a sea of Labour MPs taking shots at me, we wouldn't have got anything done. You down in Parliament advocating for the Treasury to come here, the money for Darlington Station, all of the other things that you've done makes my life easier helping to deliver that, because I know I've got a strong advocate in Westminster who's banging on all the right doors to make it happen. And I think that's underestimated, that people think I do a lot, and I'm hoping and I'm optimistic that during this general election people locally will recognise that it takes more than one person, and we've actually got a really good team together. And if we want to continue with what's happened over the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've got to keep the team together, keep the show on the road,
Definitely.
right?
Definitely.
Otherwise, what's the alternative? Having an equivalent of Jenny Chapman back in Darlington. I mean, nobody wants to see that, do they?
Can we just dive into that teamwork? Because I believe strongly that it was that teamwork that helped us deliver the Treasury.
It was.
And I know that people think, well, what did he really do to help get the Treasury here? It wasn't Ben's decision. It was somebody else. They had nothing to do with it. And that sometimes comes up on the doorsteps. But I know the inside story, and
only
so
from
do
the
you.
socialists. It's only the socialists that are trying to complain about something that's genuinely incredible in the town, right? Yeah. I mean, funny enough, I had a meeting this morning, name dropping here. I had a meeting this morning with the Canadian High Commissioner, who was absolutely fascinated about the Darlington Economic Campus project and how have you made it work, and Canada are looking at decentralisation, but it never seems to work, and why has it worked here, and how did you make it happen? Yeah. And I went into the whole backstory of it required local MPs to get on board, to bang the drum at every possible opportunity in Westminster. It required having a Chancellor in Rishi Sunak who was happy to have a fight and take on the vested interests from the civil servants who were like, this is a terrible idea. And then they kind of succumb to the fact that, well, this is going to happen. This all has to go to Manchester. And I remember talking to you, and we both talked to Rishi about, well, we need to arm Rishi with information against the system to allow him to make that decision. People don't see, it's a bit like an iceberg, right? People don't see 90% of the work that we put in the background. I just kind of laugh at people when they said we didn't have any involvement, because I always say, well, isn't it strange that in the 5 years we've been around, quite a lot's happened, but in the 50 years before that, not very much happened. It's a bit of a coincidence, that, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, it would easily have gone to Newcastle or Bradford had we not been working together.
If it wasn't us, it would have gone to Manchester. All of the permanent secretaries, all of the civil servants were saying this has to go. If we're going to do it, it can only go to Manchester. It wouldn't have come anywhere near Darlington.
But it's brought about such transformational change. So we've already got 8 government departments, 750 jobs already filled, a further 1,000 in the pipeline.
It's more than that now, 1,500.
And they've acquired that site that's about to get built out. And we know from the reports that have been done on the Treasury campus that it's got this unstoppable momentum. Yeah. It's putting millions and millions of pounds into our local economy. But for me, the really, really great bit of news about it, last year, 2 young men, one from QE, one from Carmel, instead of going to university, they got graduate apprenticeships there, staying local, but still going far in their careers. And that's kind of what I really feel is one of the greatest things that I think you and I and collectively we've done in respect of levelling up.
I mean, there are so many examples of that. Again, this morning with the High Commissioner, I was giving an example of, there was a lady actually in her 40s, fine, in a decent kind of job in the local area, ended up doing a little bit of retraining, managing to get a fantastic position in the Darlington Economic Campus. Has been working on the last 2 budgets. Having a Darlington voice, having an effect on policy, giving this woman a fantastic brand new career, retraining in her 40s. That would never have happened. And they're just 2 or 3 examples. Yeah. We could sit here all day and talk about all those examples.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh, again, go on.
Yeah, airport.
Yeah.
When can I get to Torremolinos on a flight to Malaga?
Well, that's a good question. I wish I knew the answer to that one, Peter. I've stuck my neck out, haven't I? And I said we are going to get flights to Tenerife and Malaga, and we will. I mean, all of the airlines are very interested in putting more capacity in. Yeah. The realistic answer is the earliest it will be next summer, because the first thing any airline's going to do when they're putting in a new route to a new airport in a new region, I appreciate we've had these flights before, is they'll always dip their toe in the water in summer season, the height of season, because it de-risks it for their point of view. Particularly, because with Tenerife, for instance, you could make the argument, well, we could do winter sun. But from an airline's point of view, de-risking it means go height of season, most popular.
Right.
We're going to do, April to October. That's the summer season. So we're working on that. It's objectively true to say that we've been speaking to EasyJet, Jet2, Wizz, Ryanair are obviously already at the airport.
Sure.
I am 100% confident we will get them. Can I guarantee they'll be here coming from April next year? Not necessarily, but it's definitely possible. So you might have to wait another.
I don't know if you know this.
A little bit longer to get on that flight from Teesside.
I don't know if you know this, but my most popular post on Facebook ever of all time was that photograph of you stood on the steps up to an aircraft.
Oh, yeah.
With those ladies that were heading off for a hen weekend.
Oh, right, that one. Yeah. That was the first Ryanair flight. Yeah,
it was fantastic.
From to Mallorca. But I mean, that doesn't surprise me because irrespective of what goes on across the region, including things like Teesworks and other things that are going on in Middlesbrough and Hartlepool and stuff that we're talking about in Darlington, the most popular thing I have ever done, just objectively from all the data, is the airport. People love the airport. And I've never understood why, particularly our opponents in the local Labour Party, I've never understood why they hate the airport so much. And after the last 7 years, you would think everything that's happened and all of the elections that have been hard, that they've lost and we've won, largely as a part of the airport, they still haven't figured out that the local residents and people of Teesside, Darlington, Hartlepool really want an airport. I mean, they just still don't get it.
And I think that's the kind of distinction and difference between our politics. All of us locally as local Conservatives, we're from here.
Yeah.
We're born here, brought up here, raised here, went to school here, as opposed to what had happened in the past with the Labour Party planting people in this region to be their advocates and sort of then disappearing off.
Yeah.
We're rooted in those communities. We're rooted here, and we know what people want. So that pragmatic politics wins, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, you just need to look at, again, they're still not learning the lessons, right? You look in Redcar, the Labour candidate from over there's from Kent. Yeah. You look in Stockton North, their Labour candidates from Newcastle, Gateshead area. Right. You look in, Stockton, their candidates just moved up from London. It's like, your opponent definitely does not have the local credentials that you have either. And you just think, it's not necessarily the be-all and end-all that you always have to be local, but it helps, right? You understand the community, you understand the local population, you understand people much better when you're from that population in that community than if you just parachuted in because Keir Starmer and the National Labour Party think it's a good idea.
Just to move on, Teesworks, the airport might be a big flagship in terms of policy for you, but Teesworks is probably the biggest single jobs creation, regeneration project in Europe. And you've led from the front on that. But it's, as we sadly know, been mired in some controversy over recent months with people detracting. And I know personally, from the conversations you and I have had, how tough that's been and how difficult that's been. Can we just have a bit of a chat about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can talk to me about whatever you like, Peter. People usually do. Usually journalists, I know you're not a journalist, are much more direct and hard-hitting than you are, Peter. So thank you for taking it easy on me. You are absolutely right. The airport is, from a policy point of view and from a politics point of view, is by far and away the most popular thing that we've done to date. But if you look back, and when anybody looks back in 10, 15, 20 years' time, the biggest thing that will happen to this region by a country mile, it doesn't even compare, is what's happening at Teesworks at this moment in time. The literally tens of thousands of jobs that it's creating, the billions of pounds of investment that we're securing that we've never seen in this part of the country before, and the amount of money the taxpayer is going to earn from that site is absolutely incredible. Like here's something. It's not a secret, but it's not something we've ever said publicly before, that we now have projections that show that when that site is fully built out over the next 5 to 7 years, so by the end of the decade, 2030, that site will be completely finished and they'll have thousands and thousands of jobs, loads of factories, lots of stuff going on. People don't realise, for example, that will make, we project, about £250 million a year in business rates. And every single pound of that £250 million, I mean, it's an eye-watering number, right? Every single penny of that will stay within the local area to be reinvested back into the local area. So half of that automatically has to go to the local council. So it's going to basically make Redcar Council one of the richest councils in the country. So no excuses around funding services properly and supporting local communities. You know, hopefully going back to things like free car parking and stuff like that they've taken out. And the other half stays on a regional basis to be able to be spent in the region for economic growth to be able to support the Freeport. People don't know that. So that's £250 million a year. That is basically Teesside, Darlington, Hartlepool having its own sovereign wealth fund to be able to spend in the region. That's the impact. And again, we talk about it now, and anybody kind of watching online or listening online, it's very difficult to grasp the scale of that, but that's just how big this project is and how the impact it is going to have is completely going to revolutionise local people's lives in better wages, better living standards, more money in their pocket, better aspirations and opportunity for their children and future generations. It is absolutely off the scale, which is why, for example, just this morning we have the Canadians coming over saying, how have you done this? We've had the Japanese, the Saudis, the Qataris, the Americans, the French, the Germans. They are coming here and saying, how have you done this? Because we need to do it in our own country. That is the journey that we're on, and that is the difference it's going to make to local people. It's just off the scale.
So just to try and tie that story, because I know for some people here in Darlington, Teesworks, Redcar is a bit of a stretch away.
It's not that far, Peter. It's just down the road, man.
But is it going to mean jobs and opportunity for people living here in Darlington?
Absolutely. The problem we're going to have is there are not enough people to fill those jobs. Right. That's the place that we're now in. So again, compare it to before when no jobs, businesses closing, people feeling like they have to move away. You know, their children growing up, going to university, not coming home, or just feeling like they've got to move away to get a job. People working offshore because that's the only thing they can do, living away from home.
Yeah.
No longer. Yeah. You know, you want a really well-paid job. You want to go and be a welder or a plater working for SIA, who are building their factory. You can earn £75,000 a year right here. You don't have to move away. You don't have to live away in the North Sea. You don't have to go down to Hinkley Point. You can do it right here. It's amazing. If you think the average wage across the whole of our region is about £27,000-28,000 a year, you can go and be not a specialist, but a welder, standard welder or a plater, and you can earn £75,000 a year on our doorstep. And that's just one example of many. I mean a lot. And the problem we're actually going to have, I think, is a very positive one, but it's a problem we're going to have to tackle where all of these businesses are going to pay massive wages. There's going to be thousands of jobs. It's going to suck up a huge amount of opportunity from local people who are going to get those jobs. And I've had it, for example, in Darlington with local engineering firms, even with the Treasury and the Darlington Economic Campus. I've had local accountancy firms, financial advisors saying, we can't afford to pay the wages that local people are getting working there. And so we're going through a transition, but a necessary transition from a low jobs, low wage economy through to lots of jobs in a higher wage economy, which is good for people, but we've got to manage that transition so local businesses can survive and be part of that fantastic story.
It's improving the prosperity of everybody right throughout the area.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that kind of leads me on to transport. We've talked about the airport, but most people, most days are not using planes, are they?
No.
It's roads, trains and buses. So we had some good news, didn't we? Tail end of last year.
We did, October last year, yeah.
Cancellation of HS2.
Great idea.
So have I got this figure right? £971 million?
I mean, give or take 2 or 3 million quid. Yeah, you're pretty bang on, but yeah.
So that's cracking on for nearly a billion quid, isn't it?
Yeah,
a billion quid that was handed to TVCA for you to allocate out for a range of projects.
Yes, that's right.
So
I assume in the next Labour government, if they get in and it's not a Conservative government, don't cancel it.
Well,
there are provisos to these things, Peter.
There's a very interesting analogy going back to 1997, and there'll be some voters out there who are watching and listening this who won't necessarily remember this, but in 1997, when Tony Blair got elected with his landslide, the entire country's road building programme was cancelled.
Was it?
Entirely cancelled.
I was a bit young to remember that, Peter, sorry.
Well, I remember it. So you can't always rely on the Labour Party following through with transport investment. But that 971 million that you got for us here, can you just talk us through some of the projects that you've allocated that to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
And specifically,
the list is long, but I was going to say,
concentrate on the one that I want you to talk about.
The list is long, but given that we are in Darlington with a Darlington business, with I'm sure that hopefully the next Darlington MP, we should be talking about the Darlington projects, right? And we already have, to be objectively true, the premier transport project in the region, which is the redevelopment of Darlington Station, which, again, £140 million. One of the things I find fascinating, I don't know whether you find this on the doorstep, Peter, I get a little bit on social media, and I don't know whether it's because we're in an election that you get kind of angry people, or whether probably bots being set up. But I've actually had people that appear to be from Darlington saying, why are we spending £140 million on Darlington Station? Which just boggles my mind, because had we not spent any money on Darlington, people would be complaining that we're not getting money spent on us, but it's going to Manchester, London or Birmingham or Newcastle, and we never get our fair share. Not only are we not getting our fair share, we're getting actually much more than objectively we should get on a per head of population basis. And now people are complaining that we're getting this money. So, I mean, Darlington Station's an incredible project, and if you want to get into it, I'm sure we can talk to people in a bit more detail.
There's no need. We've got your whiteboard videos.
Oh, you've got that?
Reshared them.
Yeah. That's one of the most popular videos I ever did, the whiteboard video. I don't know why. But
It really neatly explains and shows what's happening. And I've been on the bank top side. I've been into the multi-story. I've been in the new atrium, which is absolutely spectacular. And then there's the work that's all going on the track side as well. So it's kind of three projects together that link together.
And there's a really scary, well, not scary, I think slightly scary part of the process that's coming in December, where the Network Rail have had to request a closure of the East Coast Main Line for, I think it's 53 hours, because they only have this 53-hour time span to lift the bridge from the new station that we're building.
Yep.
That's going to pierce through the roof of the existing station,
Yep.
and the roof's going to come in, go over the East Coast Main Line and where the platforms are, and go into the main station. Now, it's scary because if they get that wrong, and they don't do it in time, or something goes wrong with that bridge, and you close down the East Coast Main Line for potentially weeks and weeks and weeks, it just goes to show the scale of that project, that the National Rail are happy for us to do that.
Talking to the guys on the site, there's a really sweet spot. They've got very little limit room between the roof and the parapet. I'm
glad that I'm not the project manager on that bit of the project.
It's up high as well.
I'll be getting a phone call in the morning. Did it go okay? I've not seen anything in the news. It's gone horribly wrong. But no, I mean, that's incredible. Again, for Darlington as the gateway into the region, it puts our best foot forward. I mean, Darlington Station deserves that investment anyway as the home of the railway. And it's going to deliver significantly more services right across the local region, as well as actually increasing capacity on the East Coast Main Line. But going full circle, you've already got the best transport project in the region, and you are then going to be home with the £1 billion that we've got to by far the most significant road project that's going to be delivered over the next 5 to 7 years in the Darlington bypass, the Darlington Link Road, going from kind of Great Burton round the north east of Darlington. That's been allocated as part of that money, and we've already got it signed off. So again, something people might not know, as mayor, people think I kind of go into a room and just sign a load of stuff off. But that £1 billion programme, I had to get the support of the 5 local authorities. So we got the £1 billion, and I've actually had a plan approved by the 5 leaders of the local authorities. And one of those that's been signed off is the Darlington Link Road. And we're going through some options appraisals at the minute. I know there is a preferred route that's been consulted on lots and lots and lots, but that was a couple of years ago now. So the right thing to do is just update that piece of work and check whether that's right, or whether there's a more cost-effective option that achieves the same outcomes. Sure. We should have an indication of that in September. And then there's a whole detailed process about planning and land assembly. So, we could see this thing delivered and we could see ourselves in construction by 2026. So not far away, but I mean, this is a massive road project, only 18 months away before getting a spade in the ground. So it's all going fantastically well. And it's not actually just for Darlington. It's going to relieve a huge amount of pressure off the town, but it's relieving a huge amount of pressure because we're going to be moving a lot more trucks from the Freeport and the airport onto our main arterial road network. And the last thing we want is to put more pressure on the town. And actually, it's going to inhibit growth in Darlington and across the region unless we have this road that relieves that kind of pressure and makes it efficient.
It's going to relieve a huge amount of pressure, traffic to and from the A1 going up West Auckland Road. So it might seem a stretch away, but to get to the A1 coming around the A66 and getting onto the A1 is going to be a huge bonus for the town. It has come up on the doorsteps, I'll be honest. People have talked about it, particularly in those northern parts that will be affected.
Yeah.
And what I've said to them is that we are at that stage where a route is being mapped out and discussed, and that will obviously be consulted on as part of the planning process. So can we just say absolutely clear here now, a route hasn't actually been plotted?
No. So again, just to be clear with people, there was a consultation, an extensive consultation that was done a couple of years ago, and that came out with 2 potential routes. But it was still fairly early in its design, where it would go. Obviously, the now Labour-run council have been going through this master planning process for the north of Darlington for housing. So what we've done is, that was a couple of years ago. It was sat on a shelf because, frankly, we didn't have any money to take it forward.
Well, I know you didn't have the money because I've spent the last 4 years banging on the doors of
and my door as well, to be fair.
What can we do to get this road?
And we haven't had any money to spend on it. So now we've got the money, like I say, assuming that the new government doesn't change anything, whoever that might be, then it's only right and proper that we revisit that, because lots of things have changed in 2 years. Like I said, the new council with the new Labour-run council sticking thousands of houses on there, they've already consulted on their master plan for it. That, by definition, is going to impact on where we were 2 years ago, because that wasn't there 2 years ago. So we're going to take those 2 routes that we've got. We're doing some internal work to validate whether the routes that have been done are the right routes or not as preferred options. But irrespective of whether they are, or whether we think an alternative is better, once we have those preferred options of whatever that then looks like come September, there will be a major public consultation before making any decisions. And to be fair, that's not just me saying it. By law, you would have to have it through planning, because of, we think it'll go through the local planning authority rather than as a DCO, a big national planning application. There's issues around housing, there's issues around national highways. All of that is going to require major public consultation. And I actually think there's a potential, my officers are telling me from some of the initial work that they've been doing, that they might find a way that they can deliver it quicker, more cheaply, and less intrusively to parts of Skirningham, and particularly Skirningham Woods, which I know is something that is very dear to people's hearts in the town.
Sure. I've got some other things that I want to talk about, but you've been in Westminster now for a shade over a year in your role in the House of Lords.
No, a year next month.
So, and I've spent 4.5 years there. It's a crazy, mad, strange place, and it works in a very different way to the rest of the world, doesn't it? How important do you think it is to have strong local champions in Westminster shouting up for our region that for decades was just forgotten about?
I mean, there's a really interesting dynamic that could happen here. I mean, people don't need to believe what you and I say. They can go back and see their own experiences over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And what I found in my personal experience, having been lived and brought up here my whole life, is the local MPs that we used to have would try and backheel any responsibility and just blame somebody else. It was either a Tory government or, it was either, actually a lot of, in the Labour years, it was just being quiet, because they didn't want to cause problems with the Labour government, but they didn't want to admit that actually we were being ignored, right? And we've literally had Tony Blair on our doorstep, Peter Mandelson, Mo Molan, Phil Wilson. I mean, they've all been here, and what did we get out of it? Nothing. And there's a really interesting inflection point that we've got.
Some PFI projects.
We've got a few PFI projects. I mean, you've got the hospital, and you've got James Cook as well. I mean, millstones around our neck that we're still dealing with. But I think we're coming to a really interesting point that, let's address the elephant in the room. If there is a Labour government, and there might not be, but if you listen to the media, they were saying there's going to be a Labour government. There's a really interesting thing that the people of Darlington need to think about come this election. In that, a few weeks ago, I was re-elected for the third time. I was elected for the third time, which I, in my wildest dreams, I couldn't be more proud and honoured to be able to have that position. But there's a really commonsensical argument here. Well, why elect me again? Because you're obviously happy with the things that I'm doing and you like the projects and you want me to keep going, which is what the electorate have basically said at that election. Why do that if what you're going to do is surround me with a load of local Labour MPs who are going to not help? Because all I'm going to do is continue to bang the drum for the best thing for our area, which is what we've both done for, you've been in Parliament since 2019, so the last 5 years. We've been happy to bang the door at a Conservative government. We've been happy to tell them that we need more. I absolutely guarantee a Labour government and local Labour MPs will not do that. So we need that team to stay together because, as you've done constantly for the last 5 years, like I said, not just with Westminster, but you've been knocking on my door, is we need those local champions to make sure they put the local area first. And I've got a real worry with a Labour government, with a sea of Labour MPs in the region. They're going to toe the party line, they're going to shut up, they're going to be quiet. And while we're trying to push the agenda and continue to make progress, they're not going to be those local champions, and they're going to put the party before the area. And that's what I'm saying, and people can disbelieve me or not, but all I would say on that point is look at history. Look at what history tells you, and they do it every single time. What we can say is whether there's a Labour government or a Conservative government, because we've done it under a Conservative government, we will speak up when we think the government's got it wrong, and we will always fight for our local area, even where, from a national politics perspective, it might not be a smart thing to do. Sure. But for our local area, it's absolutely the right thing to do.
Yeah. You've got a leaflet in front of you.
I have. I've not seen this before. I was just saying before we started, I'm slightly jealous of your leaflet.
This is kind of my Levelling Up magazine repackaged for the general election, my general election special edition, and it's packed full of information about all of the wonderful things that have been going on over the last few years, including more than £1 billion being spent, invested, and granted to Darlington. But on the back page, is my focus for the future. Now, these are things that I haven't necessarily got the power to deliver. And we all know that as MPs, we don't necessarily get any power or any money. But I think my track record speaks for itself in helping to deliver what I have already delivered for Darlington. So I just wondered if you could just take a canter through those.
We'll have a look. I mean, just to address that point, though, and I get this with, for example, the new hospital that I've promised to build on, as part of my election campaign.
But Ben, you haven't got the power to do.
Well,
that.
Exactly that. I mean, I heard that argument during my campaign, so I understand that you're getting it as well. Yeah. But that is one, it's just dishonest, and two, if it's not dishonest, it's real ignorance of what a public servant can do in the role that they've got. I mean, the soft power, whether you're an MP or whether you're a mayor, being able to flex those muscles and use that role to get what you want doesn't mean that you have to stick to the remit that you've got. And I mean, as I said during my campaign, it didn't say in the devolution deal the mayor has control over airports, but I still went and bought an airport. It didn't say, what the mayors should do is they should devolve government outside of London, so we need to bring the Treasury to Darlington. We did it because we thought it was a good idea. And you'll remember at the time, people said, it's got nothing to do with you. How can you do that? That's a government decision. But you know what? We did it, didn't we?
We did.
And that's the point. And again, rather than having to believe what you and I say, they can see, look at what we've delivered over the last 5 years, in my case, 7 years.
Yeah.
And look at what happened over the last 40, 50 years. It is not a coincidence that so much has happened in the last 4 or 5 years. Because you've got basically people, I include myself in this, and Rachel, my wife, would absolutely back us up. We don't have lives, do we, Peter?
No,
we literally
don't.
wake up in the morning.
We don't.
Before we get out of bed, we're answering emails and text messages.
Yeah.
And, from the moment you close your eye to the moment you close your eyes, all we do is work. Your life goes on hold.
It's the first thing you think about. It's the last thing you think about at night. And the only time I get a break is actually when I go on holiday and I literally turn my phone off for 7 days. It's the only time I get any downtime.
But it also demonstrates the clear choice at the general election that we are going to do things, we're going to push the envelope, and we're going to keep delivering things that people didn't expect us to deliver because apparently it's not in our remit. And what the Labour Party is saying, and the Labour candidates are saying, oh, well, that's got nothing to do with us. We're going to wash our hands of it, and we're only going to do what it says on a piece of paper an MP should do. Well, if that's the case, all you're going to do is walk through the lobby and do what Keir Starmer tells you to do. You're not going to do anything for the local area. There's a real choice here. And I would say, as I've said when I ask people to vote for me, I'm sure you'd do the same, Peter, because your track record is fantastic. Judge people by their actions, not their words. Look at what you've done in the last 5 years compared to what you've said. It's very easy for the Labour Party to say things, but look at their track record over the last 50 years. It's not a good one. So why would we want to change it? I don't know why we would want to change what's happening in Darlington, because it's fantastic. We just need more of it. And we need you. We need more of Peter.
So
we need more Peters across the country.
Back to my plan. Back to my plan here. What's the chances of TVCA being able to help us deliver a multi-storey car park for DMH?
I mean, it's absolutely possible. And again, this is another example of you banging on my door and not letting me off the hook here, Peter. So no, absolutely. I mean, we need to be looking in that, and hopefully you'll continue to be around after the election, and we can get our heads together. We can get in a room and figure out how we make this happen.
Well, I have already started some work on this. So I've already had discussions with the hospital itself and with the Integrated Care Board in the North East. And I've also had conversations with ministers in the Department for Health. We're at that stage where nobody wants to take responsibility for it. Nobody's got the money for it.
I was going to say, money's the big thing as well in this.
And it's too difficult.
Yeah.
And it's not a priority. But I can tell you, Ben, if I'm re-elected, it's a priority for me.
And again, we can help with that because, you know me, I don't mind sticking my head above the parapet and taking responsibility. So those conversations are great, but you're absolutely right. The next stage is sitting around and saying, okay, how much is this going to cost? Where can we get the money from? Can we contribute towards that to help de-risk it, that will leverage more money from elsewhere? Because it's great. I mean, hospitals will always say, oh yeah, we'll do that, but we haven't got the money, so go and find the money. And it all comes back to money. And that's the same with departments, right? So no, there's absolutely a way through this, Peter. And as I said during my election, building a new hospital is just part of the plan. If people paid attention to what I said, North Tees needs replacing. North Tees Hospital just needs replacing. It is falling down, that's fine.
Absolutely.
But the nuance in that whole argument isn't saying you replicate it like for like. You deliver a hospital, an acute hospital, that requires the services to deliver acute care to people that need it. And what we're already seeing, and the zeitgeist is already changing in health, that actually more elective services and other services that might not be essential to be in an acute hospital can be delivered in local communities. And so when people get into the nuance of
things like the diagnostic centre.
Exactly. And so my plan is much more nuanced in that a new hospital will also deliver more services to Hartlepool. It will also improve Darlington Memorial Hospital, either from a service, like what services are being delivered in the hospital or elsewhere in the town, but also the infrastructure that helps deliver those services like car parks. So I kind of see it wrapped into a health plan that is centred around a new hospital in North Tees, but delivers many, many more benefits across the region, which is why it is eminently sensible to be able to deliver a new car park for Darlington Memorial. We just need the right people around the table to figure out the detail of it, which is why I hope you're still around that table come the 4th of July.
Well, can I say thank you very much to you, Ben, for finding the time in your busy schedule to come to Darlington this afternoon to chat with me. It's rare, isn't it, that you get the chance to spend this amount of time. It's normally a quick WhatsApp, a quick text message, a voicemail, running around here, there and everywhere. And so getting that time to sit down with you has been really fantastic. I can tell you the doorstops have been really positive over the last few months. First of all, for you, in the run-up to your re-election. And I've had some really positive responses on the doorsteps over the last few weeks. We're coming up to the final 17 days of the election at the point in time that we're recording this. And there's some voices on the doors think that they need to punish the government. They want to give the Conservatives a bloody nose. They want to go and vote for reform. They're not happy with Keir Starmer and they're leaving the Labour Party, but they're switching to reform. But there are one or two Conservative voters who've seen what's on offer from reform and think that that's going to be the answer. I know what the electoral maths look like in this constituency, as I'm sure that you do.
Yep.
We've still got to keep fighting all the way to the very end to make sure that this seat doesn't fall back into the hands of Labour, because a vote for reform will deliver a Labour MP in this constituency.
And again, I hope people really listen to what you just said there, Peter, because that is not a soundbite. I mean, it is an objective fact that come the 4th of July, the MP will either be you as the Conservative MP or you will get a Labour MP. There is no alternative. And again, this is the nerdy part of politics, right? Because people don't necessarily understand the nuances of polling and what that means. It is not possible, it is not realistic to suggest that anybody else is going to win the election in Darlington. It's one or the other. And so that's why I say to people on the doorstep, which is why I'm very selfishly saying, look, if you want the stuff to continue, your choice isn't about reform. It's not about national politics. It's about look at your town in Darlington, look at what happened under a Conservative council, look at what's happened under a Conservative mayor, look at what happened historically with a Labour MP, and now look what's happening with a Labour council. That's the choice you're making. That's the real choice.
Just to illustrate that point, just whilst we're here, can you talk for just a moment about the level of interaction that you've had with the two Labour MPs that are here in the Tees Valley?
Oh yeah, we're great friends. Yeah, we get on really, really well. No, the two Labour MPs, for people that don't know, Alex Cunningham, who's retiring actually and isn't standing at the election in Stockton North, and the infamous Andy MacDonald from Middlesbrough are the two most horrendous politicians I've ever come across in my life. I mean, Alex Cunningham is just inept in general. He's just completely ineffective. But Andy MacDonald is a genuinely destructive force. You know, I irrespective of politics, I've never met a person who I know who has actively done things that he knows will actively damage his area and local people for political gain. I've never seen that in any political party, including the Labour Party, other than for him. And I look at some of the candidates around for the Labour Party, and I really worry that we might find ourselves in a really destructive place when things are going so positively in our local area. And again, look what happened when we had the Conservative Council in Darlington. Look at all the good stuff that was happening. Yep. Labour get in, they stop the fireworks, they pull out free car parking, they're trying to destroy the town. You know, we walked around the town, genuinely, I mean, I'm not just saying this to anybody that's watching, I couldn't believe how many business owners and people just pulled you up in the street and were like, oh, hi, Peter, you're in the town. I don't know whether you actually do your job properly or whether you just wander around the town speaking to businesses. But, you know, people are saying under a Conservative council it was better. Yeah. And I hope people make the link that that's not unique. That is about what the local Conservative Party is delivering for people. So I appreciate, you know, there are national issues that people want to get better. The one question I would say is, well, is it going to get better under Keir Starmer? I've not spoken to a person on the doorstep that thinks the answer is yes. There is no love for the Labour Party. So if there's no love for the Labour Party and you don't want to vote for Labour and you're frustrated with the Conservative Party, look at what the local Conservative Party and look at what your local MP and Peter Gibson's done. I would defy anybody to suggest that the alternative is better. Because if we all want what's best for our local community, I need the team around me that I've had for the last 5 years who can help us continue to bang the drum. And in Darlington, that absolutely means we need to re-elect you. And like I say, I think when people ultimately go into that polling booth, people will give that serious consideration and they will be ultimately deciding, one, who's going to be in government. Like you say, they might be upset with what the government are doing, but they really don't like Keir Starmer. And I think lots of people will then overlay that with, you know what, but locally, the Conservative MP and the Conservative Mayor and the Conservatives are doing a good job, so why would I change that? And I think we've got to get that message across, that it's not just about the national picture, it's also about keeping the local show on the road and more investment, more jobs, and putting Darlington back on the map, which we are doing. Objectively, we're doing. So why would we want to try and put that at risk? I mean, the one thing we haven't talked about, which, you know, is actually really important, it's been going on in the town now for a couple of years, it's been in planning and, you know, it feels like it's starting to come together, is the Railway Heritage Quarter, which I know you talk about a lot and have been a huge champion for. And, you know, my organisation has funded that project. I think for a lot of people, even within Darlington, they don't quite understand what the project is and what it's going to mean. Peter, you're the local champion, right? You're in bed much more than I am in with this project. Tell people what it's going to mean.
Well, this job, being the MP for Darlington, the birthplace of the railways, is a perfect opportunity to bring out my inner railway heritage history geekery, because there doesn't seem to be a day of the week goes by where I'm not involved with something to do with the railways or heritage. And the flagship that is the Rail Heritage Quarter, that segment of our town off North Road, just at the top of Northgate, is a really fantastic project, the bulk of the money having come from Tees Valley Combined Authority. So what it is, it's a redevelopment of the Head of Steam Museum. It's the establishment of a whole range of other things on the periphery, so the goods shed being turned into a cafe and a welcome centre, funding for a beautiful clock by the Rail Heritage Trust, new entrance and access way into the museum, which also makes disabled access to North Road Station that much easier. And I can talk for hours about the battle that I'm still having to deal with, the issues with North Road Station, raising the platform, extending the platform, etc. You've seen a relocation for the A1 Locomotive Trust and a range of other railway-related heritage organisations to the periphery into either repurposed buildings or new buildings. And what it will mean is that this visitor attraction puts us on that route between the National Railway Museum at York and their site up at Shildon. So you get a third stop, if you like,
Yep.
with an interactive experience where you can travel on the train in a sort of simulator. There's engaging activities for kids, and it's a great way of also being able to show that ongoing building of engines, because there's a bridge, if you haven't seen it, there's a bridge that goes over the line, the Bishop line, that takes you into the viewing gallery of the A1 Locomotive Trust. So you go to a museum to learn about the history of railways, and you come out of a door and you go up a lift and you go across a bridge, and you can actually watch a real brand new steam engine fit for the East Coast Main Line for use being actually built.
And is that something that comes up on the doorstep? Are people enthused by the project and people see it coming together? Or
I think there's an awful lot of pride in this town about our connections to the railways, and I think in the past it hasn't been celebrated as much as it could have been.
Well, the council back in the 90s rejected the National Railway Museum for Darlington.
It was a bit further back.
Oh, was it
that.
back? Was it further
back in the 70s, I believe?
Oh, was it? I thought it was more recent than that.
So a large part of the collection that went to the National Railway Museum was from here.
Yeah.
And if you notice from my list of plans, I want to see some brown tourist signs on the A1.
Absolutely.
If York's got them, if Harrogate's got them, why can't Darlington have them at Junction 57 for northbound traffic and Junction 59?
But do you find as well with this project, because again it gets talked about and you see it in the Echo every now and again, and you obviously talk about it a lot, it feels like it's not really coming to people's fore at the minute. It's like, oh yeah, it's going on, but I mean, we're in a phase now where it's actually starting.
Well, it opens on the 16th of July.
I was going to say, it's not. I mean, it's literally just round the corner. It's almost like snuck up on us that this thing is actually now about to open.
It opens on the 16th of July. I've got great hopes for it bringing many more visitors to our town. This is about having a visitor attraction, telling the Darlington Railway story to a much wider audience ahead of the 200th anniversary of the railways. And what does footfall do? Footfall brings people who are going to spend money.
Absolutely.
In cafes, and bars, and shops, maybe stay overnight in a hotel. So it's all helping that local tourist economy here in Darlington, which we haven't done enough about in the past. So that's giving us the ability to do that in a really positive way. So thank you for the support that you've given to the project with the funding from TVCA.
Well, it's like I say, you keep banging on my door, Peter. At some point, I've got to give in. All right, Peter, you can have it. It's fine. Yeah.
Ben, thank you so much for all that you've done over the last 7 years for our region. And thank you for coming along today to talk to me about everything that we're doing. And I hope to be able to continue to work with you on the 5th of July and moving forward.
Fantastic. And if you're listening, vote Peter Gibson on the 4th of July.
Thanks.